That which sees through the eye is the self. You are that. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Welcome to Vedira, a space where Eastern wisdom and modern psychology walk together. In this episode, Carl Jung meets the eternal self of Vedanta. Let's begin the journey inward. There are moments in history when two rivers of thought, seemingly unrelated, begin to move toward one another, carving new meaning into the world. One such river flows from the West, shaped by the great Swiss psychologist Carl Gustav Jung, whose work mapped the unseen terrain of the human psyche. The other flows from the East, ancient and sacred, born in the forests of India, where sages once meditated on the nature of consciousness and wrote verses that still echo today, the philosophy of Vedanta. When these two rivers meet, something extraordinary happens. Psychology meets spirituality. Science meets metaphysics. And the individual soul, once seen as separate and isolated, is revealed to be not a closed system, but a drop in the ocean of collective being. Carl Jung was not just a psychologist, he was a seeker. A man who believed that the mind was more than neurons and impulses. It was myth, meaning, and mystery. Born in 1875 in Switzerland, Jung initially worked alongside Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. But Jung's vision quickly expanded beyond Freud's framework of libido and repressed desires. He saw deeper forces at play, patterns in the mind that transcended culture and personal history. He called this the collective unconscious. To Jung, the collective unconscious was not a theory, it was a reality experienced in dreams, art, religion, and the myths of all humanity. It was a vast storehouse of symbols, archetypes, and spiritual truths shared across time and space. These were not learned ideas but inherited structures of the psyche, ways of perceiving the world embedded in every human being. Jung's idea was revolutionary. Until then, psychology had focused on the individual, personal trauma, personal development, personal behavior. But Jung pointed to a deeper layer, one that did not belong to you or me, but to us. He wrote, "In addition to our immediate consciousness, which is of a thoroughly personal nature and which we believe to be the only empirical psyche, there exists a second psychic system of a collective, universal, and impersonal nature which is identical in all individuals." This was no small claim. Jung was suggesting that beneath the personal mind lay a shared psychic field, a kind of invisible web connecting every human soul. And here's where Vedanta enters, not as a distant cousin, but as an ancient twin. In Vedanta, the self is not the ego, not the personality, not even the mind. It is Atman, the unchanging witness, the eternal spark of Brahman, the infinite consciousness that underlies all existence. And just as Jung said the personal unconscious is but a surface above a deeper collective one, the Vedantic sages said that the jiva, the individual soul, is a wave on the ocean of universal consciousness. Jung never formally studied Vedanta, but the parallels between his work and the teachings of the Upanishads are striking. Both speak of layers of reality, inner journeys, and the profound idea that we are not merely isolated beings, but expressions of a shared essence. For Jung, that essence manifested as archetypes, universal patterns of human experience. For Vedanta, it was Brahman, the singular reality behind all diversity. Let us pause here and consider the power of this convergence. What does it mean that a 20th century European psychoanalyst and a 5,000-year-old spiritual tradition arrive at such similar insights? It means that truth may not belong to any one culture, language, or era. It may be that the deepest truths are universal, whispered across time in different tongues but always pointing to the same source. Jung's most famous archetypes, the self, the shadow, the anima and animus, the wise old man, the great mother, appear in dreams, religions, and mythologies throughout the world. They are not inventions but revelations from the collective unconscious. Similarly, Vedanta speaks of cosmic principles like Maya, illusion, Atman, self, and Ishvara, the personal god, that appear across human cultures under different names. Both traditions also value symbols and dreams as portals to deeper truth. For Jung, dreams were messages from the unconscious, invitations to wholeness. In Vedantic practice, symbols like Om, the lotus, the chakra system, and deities like Shiva and Sarasvati are not mere icons. They are representations of cosmic functions, alive in meditation and inner vision. Jung was particularly fascinated by mandalas, geometric representations of the self. He found them appearing spontaneously in his patients' dreams and drawings, especially during times of inner transformation. To him, the mandala represented the archetype of wholeness, the integration of the conscious and unconscious mind. In Hinduism and Buddhism, mandalas have long been used as tools for meditation, designed to center the practitioner and connect them to the divine. That Jung, a Western psychologist, arrived at the same image independently speaks to the universality of the human psyche. It also shows how, when stripped of cultural garments, spiritual insight and psychological truth may be the same thing. But the connections go deeper still. Jung spoke often of the process of individuation, the psychological journey by which a person integrates all aspects of themselves to become whole. It is not a journey of perfection but of acceptance, of bringing the shadow into light, of harmonizing the inner opposites, of discovering the self not as ego but as totality. This process mirrors the Vedantic path of self-realization. In Vedanta, the seeker begins in ignorance, mistaking the body and mind for the self. Through study, reflection, and meditation they come to realize that the Atman, the true self, is beyond all thoughts and forms. It is pure awareness. The final goal is liberation, moksha, not escape from the world but freedom from the illusion of separateness. Jung and Vedanta both recognize that the path to wholeness is inward. Both warn of the ego's illusions. Both say that true healing, whether psychological or spiritual, comes not from adding more, but from seeing clearly what already is. Even their views on suffering align. For Jung, neurosis is often the result of a disconnection from deeper meaning, a call from the unconscious to return to the self. In Vedanta, suffering arises from ignorance of one's true nature, from mistaking the impermanent for the permanent. In both views, healing is not about suppressing symptoms, but awakening to truth. It is also worth noting how both Jung and Vedanta honor paradox. Jung saw that the psyche is full of contradictions, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, rational and irrational. Vedanta too acknowledges the paradoxical nature of reality, that Brahman is both form and formless, that the world is both real and illusory. To hold paradox is to move beyond dogma into wisdom. It is to see that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. Jung's respect for Eastern traditions was rare for his time. While others dismissed them as primitive or superstitious, he saw them as sophisticated systems of psychological insight. He corresponded with Indian scholars, studied the secret of the golden flower, and wrote introductions to books on Eastern mysticism. Yet, he also warned against the Western mind appropriating Eastern practices without proper understanding. He believed that each culture must find its own symbols, its own path to the self. This humility is perhaps what made Jung's work so enduring. He did not claim to have all the answers. He only asked better questions. And in that spirit, let us ask, what happens when we bring Jung's psychology into dialogue with Vedanta's philosophy? We begin to see a map of human consciousness that is both rigorous and radiant, grounded in the empirical yet open to the transcendent. We begin to understand that the mind is not a machine but a mirror, and what it reflects depends on the stillness we bring. We see that healing is not merely about mental health, but spiritual integration. That the journey is not from brokenness to fixing, but from fragmentation to wholeness. And we realize, perhaps most importantly, that we are not alone in this journey. That within us move forces older than memory, wiser than thought, deeper than identity. Forces that Jung called archetypes, and Vedanta calls aspects of Brahman. They live in our dreams, our fears, our longings. They shape our myths and guide our becoming. To awaken to them is to awaken to the collective unconscious, and to the ancient, silent witness behind it all. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." This awakening is the essence of both psychology and Vedanta. It is not about abandoning the world but seeing it as a projection of consciousness. It is not about transcending the human but embracing it fully, and in doing so, remembering the divine. In this space where Jung and Vedanta meet, we find not just insight but a path. A path for the modern soul, torn between science and spirit, to walk with both clarity and compassion. A path where therapy becomes sacred, and spirituality becomes grounded. A path where the self is not a concept but a living experience. This is Vedira, where the soul of psychology meets the silence of philosophy. Where the language of the West and the wisdom of the East are no longer separate dialects, but verses of the same eternal song. Let us continue to listen.